Let's talk to Erol Morkoc about this, Republican strategist, spokesperson for Republicans Overseas UK. Erol, good to have you with us tonight. I mean, you've heard what I made of Donald Trump's statement, if we can call it that, this afternoon. What was your response to it?
Well, I guess it's a twofold response. On the first hand, I respect your opinion here, and I certainly don't know your background. I'm just meeting you, but I think that to believe that Donald Trump was doing this to attack disabled people certainly wasn't the intent of the message. If you're on the ground in the United States and you're a business traveler or you're a frequent traveler, over the last 2 to 3 years, there's been a lot of collective fear about the situation in the airline industry, whether it be the hiring practices that have been incredibly skewed to DEI, whether it be that memo that he was reading out loud about trying to increase disabled diversity in the FAA. Just from a common sense, man on the ground perspective, a lot of American voters and a lot of American people were starting to feel unconfident in the direction of American airline systems. And so this culminating in what seems to be a colossal logistics failure is likely why Trump has decided to come out and talk about this. And it's something that certainly needs to be discussed. It is too early to come out like that. And I agree that Trump's, the way he conducts himself is not in the way that is expected from a U.S. president in certain circumstances.
Which surely tells you that he's not fit for the job, Erol.
No, that's not what it tells me. That's the job isn't about who's the most compassionate person after a plane crash. The job is all encompassing. He should have probably waited a little bit before discussing this, but this is a real thing that needs to come up when we find out how did these planes crash.
Right, of course, we'll come on to that. But what does it say about his judgment as a leader? That he didn't wait in the way that you and I agree he should have done. That even for one day, as those families are still finding out their loved ones are dead, he saw an opportunity to make a political, partisan, ideological attack and pin it all on disabled people. What does that say about his judgment and his ethics and his integrity?
I push back that he's pinning it all on disabled people. I understand what you're trying to say, but I don't think the candor that he was going for. To me, it tells me that President Trump is the kind of guy who looks at a problem and immediately tries to solve it. And that's usually one of the most annoying things about people with that personality trait. They immediately move on to the next stage. And perhaps Donald Trump could have more compassion. He could take more time before that. But he's speaking to the fears and angers of quite a lot of American voters. And I can tell you that my friends and I have had conversations over the last few years wondering, when is the next plane crash coming? Because if you're in the air a lot, you kind of feel it. And Donald Trump, he certainly has a lot of
What do you mean? What do you mean you feel it, Erol? What you feel?
Yeah, no,
you feel that there are too many disabled people in an air traffic control tower.
No, again, nobody is thinking about disabled people. We're thinking about people who are.
About. That's literally what he's talking about.
We're saying that those are the specific qualifications they're looking for, which is confusing to Americans. There's nobody of any creed, color, or physical ability who can't be an aircraft controller.
Donald Trump thinks so.
No, he believes that it should be a merit-based system. So if somebody who is disabled goes in there and does very well, then there's no reason they shouldn't be hired. But they shouldn't be seeking out people who are based on skin color or disability. That was the difference there. Now, I would say it's a personal thing. You asked me. You feel it because you're traveling a lot and you start to see, hey, these planes are having accidents. The doors are blowing off. You see with Boeing going on. So there's been a lot of lack of confidence from the American traveler.
And that's got to do with diversity, equality, and inclusion?
I'll tell you what it has to do, because in the same vein in Boeing, they had a DEI policies, and it came out and we heard how they were putting those doors on the planes using Dawn dish soap, and all of a sudden standards dropping. And when you have standards drop, you eventually result in Flint, Michigan, where the water is undrinkable.
Erol, it's just so lazy to say all these things that are going wrong, they're the fault of disabled people, women, ethnic and racial minorities. Yes, you are. Yes, you are. You are directly linking. You are directly. Hold on. You are directly linking efforts to hire people from those categories and those groups to things going wrong, including in this case 67 people being left dead.
Different. I'm saying that people from those communities who are unqualified should not be hired. You should only be hiring qualified people from those communities. And that is what DEI has done. It has gutted qualifications. Look at academics. Look at many different agencies in federal government. Federal government is a slush fund, and a lot of times it's been used for left-wing causes. And that has reduced the quality of the output. Now, if people are all
What's the evidence for that?
The evidence is judged. Well, the evidence for that is based on sort of trends. You see trends in productivity. You see trends in bloated administrations. Administrations in universities now outstrip professors. That's all done.
No. But the idea that the equality, diversity, and inclusion has made the airline industry or the aviation industry less safe. I mean, it sounds like a theory to me. It sounds a bit like a conspiracy theory, if I'm honest, Erol. Is there any evidence for it?
Conspiracy theorists are about 37-0 right now.
All right, are you aware of any hard evidence for what you're claiming as fact?
I am aware that there are hard evidence of people who would not have made the qualifications. We can go and look at the lawsuit being filed right now by a bunch of people against the FAA. Right. No, it's important to bring this up. And they are alleging that the test they were given, they did great on. So what did the FAA do? They eliminated that test and made it a biological background test. So that was racial discrimination against people who were not people of color. So that is a direct example of how they took away a merit-based test and replaced it with basically an ethnic head count. And that is not fair, and that is not right.
Respectfully, that wasn't what I was asking. I was asking whether the claims that Donald Trump made from the White House podium today, where he explicitly linked the death of 67 people to equality, diversity, inclusion drives and efforts, whether you are aware of any evidence whatsoever that links aviation safety to DEI, because I'm not aware of any.
Absolutely. When you look at the DEI link with the Boeing crashes, absolutely in the manufacturing, and if you make the qualification not merit-based, then of course it lowers the standards, and you've seen it in many different. We had some near collisions on runways. This is, your viewers can fact check this.
We had near collisions on runways long before efforts were made to get more women and ethnic minorities and disabled people into top jobs.
But the goal is not to have people put in top jobs based on their background. It's about merit. That is the direction the country is going for. The DEI is functionally a scam. It doesn't represent diversity of opinion. It only represents diversity of optics. We're not looking for optical diversity. We're looking for intellectual diversity.
Why is someone's political views relevant? Whether determining whether they can land a plane?
I'm not saying political views. I'm saying that I don't know where you got that from. I'm saying that people need to
diversity of opinions.
Well, if you want to have, that's what the head of the FAA said. When he said we want more diversity, he at least mentioned diversity of opinions and perspectives. That was one of the biggest pushes for the DEI policies. Keep in mind, the director of the FAA could not answer the majority of the questions posed to him during his confirmation hearing. He himself was in the DEI hire. And that's a problem. And that's a problem that the American voters saw, and that's why we elected Donald Trump.
Let's just take this back to what Donald Trump decided to do today. If you are a relative of one of those 67 people, God forbid, and you are mourning, just starting to mourn your loved ones, what would you make of turning on the television and hearing your president say what Donald Trump said today?
It depends on, to be very direct to your question, it depends on if you voted for Donald Trump or not. If you didn't like Donald Trump before this, then you have more of a reason to find that to be a callous response. But if you were a Donald Trump supporter, who the majority of Americans are, and you saw your president get out there and immediately start to get into problem-solving mode, that very well might have resonated with you. Now, I can't speak to people who are bereaved in this scenario, but oftentimes it would come down to your initial perspective of the president. I, for one, would be happy that the president is being proactive. I understand.
But hold on.
I understand. Go ahead.
When doesn't problem-solving mode, it generally helps when you're trying to solve a problem, if you wait to establish to find out what the problem actually was, rather than go wading in with your preconceived ideas about what the problem is. Let me finish, because we have absolutely no idea. I'm sure we'll agree at this point in time. Zero idea what caused that crash last night. So if Donald Trump really wanted to solve the problem, he would wait to hear the outcome and the investigation by the experts, and then he would act. He has preempted that with his own ideological agenda, hasn't he?
He has, and I'm glad you brought that up, because the way that Washington operates always is, and he brought this up in the press conference tangentially, is they go and have a committee, they do investigation, ball goes down the line, 2 years later there's some report that comes out. Donald Trump has Silicon Valley vibes, move fast and break things, and certainly it's a different way to run the White House, and it might not be what you and I expect, having been on this planet for 3-4 decades. But the fact of the matter is, that's the way the president operates. That's his personality type.
It amounts to, why wait for facts when you've got a conspiracy theory ready and waiting to go?
Well, what happens when he's right? Will you have me back on the program to discuss
happily, Erol. I'm not going to make a bet with you live on air, but I would bet a lot of money that official investigators do not find that the presence of amputees or dwarves, as Donald Trump called them, in air traffic control had anything to do with the crash we heard last night. I would stake a lot of money on that, sir.
Okay, well, when the investigation comes out, either way, I'm happy to come back and discuss it. And I do understand what you're saying. And I again push back. We're not saying that dwarves can't work in government. We're just saying that you have to be a qualified dwarf. I mean, come on, that's not
a qualified dwarf.
Yeah, you have
to.
Do you
really think that US government agencies are just saying, well, you've actually got no idea how to land a plane, but you're a bit, you're vertically challenged, so come on in.
I'll tell you why the American people think that is because and I urge your viewers to go look at the confirmation hearing of the FAA, head of the FAA. He could not answer basic protocol about how safety protocols are done. He could not answer basic protocols about how planes work. He was not in the aviation industry or whatever. He was chosen, just like Kamala Harris, for this color of his skin. And that is what the American people...
Kamala Harris, who was the vice president. Okay, Erol, thank you much. We're going to leave it there. It's Erol Morkoc, Republican strategist and spokesperson for Republicans overseas, UK. I wonder what you made of that. Where'd you start? It's not that dwarfs can't work in government. They just have to be qualified dwarfs. Genuine quote. This is the Trump agenda. This is